every website is essentially just code if you drill it down to its basic form. You can split that code into a few different types. You've got HTML, CSS, scripts. But in this lesson, we're going to focus mainly on the structure and style that your website builder is creating behind the scenes for you. Let's skim through the lesson first, and then let's get into some examples. HTML is where we start. It is the backbone of every single one of your website pages, and it essentially organizes and sorts out all of your content. So in the example here, we're looking at this. This is basically, this is your content, right? This is actual text verbiage that you want to appear on the page. And in order to explain how and structure where that content is going to show up, you're going to place it inside of HTML tags. You'll see these later as we go through some of the examples, but some of the more common ones you'll see are heading tags. So you've got H1 through 6. You've got paragraph tags. These are basically a P inside of the tags. Links you'll see inside of the A. Image tags you'll see. You've also got different types of lists. And then you've got div, which you will see as well fairly commonly. This is essentially just a way to place things inside of a container. So for example here, you can see this is an H1. Every open tag is basically followed by a closing tag. And if you look here, the heading, the H1 heading of this page is Expert Draining Solutions in Richmond. And then this is a accompanying example that could be used for a paragraph or a small line of text that may be directly underneath of that. So the browser essentially reads the structure and translates it into a visible layout that you can see. But essentially, if you just did that, you would have basically a page like this with no actual text. Or if we look at this example inside of the HTML email builder, you can see this is what your code would look like. And this is kind of ugly, so we don't want to do that. We want to actually style it. And to do that, you're going to use something called CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. Essentially what this does is it gives you the opportunity to stylize all of the structure that you created with the HTML. So if we want to look at an example of this, you can see here, this is an H1. And then inside of this, you're creating styling using these essentially pairs of things. So you have a style, like a standard style. These are all standardized. So a font size, this is used for changing font size on anything. And then you're going to decide how you want to display this font size. So for this example, we're going to say we want the font size to be 32 pixels. And for the H1, this is going to be whatever this color is using the hex code. You can also use RGB. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this. But essentially, all you need to remember moving forward from here is CSS is what does the styling, HTML is what does the structure. In order to link back to and keep your, in order to keep your code clean, what you're going to do is you're going to link to a style sheet. And again, your builder is likely doing this for you. However, this is something that is good to know. Most of your styling is created and stored separately in a document, a .css document, and then it is referenced on each page. So again, this is important to understand for later when we are talking about how to modify your CSS. You can modify CSS either globally, which is you're going to target something, a class, which we'll talk about in a moment as well, and you're going to modify that class globally across the entire site. An example of this could be changing button. You want all of your buttons to have square corners instead of rounded corners. You would do that globally versus inline, where you would be changing something in one instance of a button. Okay. Also, understanding a little bit about layout. I'm going to kind of lump these things together. This is something that you can do a little bit more research on, but you need to understand that for all of your content, you also have a ability to create padding, which is the way that you space out elements is sort of like I wonder if I can draw this somewhere. probably not easily. Whiteboard. Let's open up a whiteboard. Okay, so if this is your content right here, you have what's called padding, which is this, maybe I'll highlight it, space here. And then you have a border, which I sort of started drawing here. And then outside of that, you have what's called margin. So you technically have sort of two layers of quote unquote spacing around an element. So if this is your element, this could be your text, and you're able to create padding, border, and then outside of that is margin. So you'll use this to control spacing and things like that throughout the page. And this is, again, something we'll probably look into, and it'll make a little bit more sense as we start to see examples. You've also got layout, right? So essentially you can organize things in specific ways. You can stack them in certain orders. So you'll see things like block, inline, flex, and grid. These are, again, used to kind of tell how you want the HTML to stack and how you want it to be organized within the containers that it is residing in. Okay, responsive design. This is vital today. More and more people are using mobile phones. So you will also see things like media queries. And so what this is showing right here is that this at media, that's called the media query. For a width, anything that's under this 768 pixels in width, screen size basically. So as you shrink the screen down, the H1s are going to be 24 pixels. So by default, if we defined it up here that they were 32 pixels, once you stretch that screen so it gets a little bit smaller in size, the font size for the heading tags are going to shrink. So this is CSS. That's an example of CSS, and it is a media query. You will see this used often. This will control mobile responsibility. Mobile responsiveness, I guess, is probably a better way to put that. And essentially, as you stretch and shrink your screen, that's what kind of helps control how everything stacks. So accessibility, this is also important. This is just kind of something to touch on here. Screen readers, people that are having issues with reading things online. I mean, accessibility is important. You want to make sure that you're using alt text. And again, this doesn't necessarily follow exactly with CSS and HTML, but it is important to understand. The second thing is, and this is related to SEO, is following a actual hierarchy. So H1 tags should be a single one per page. H2s are underneath of that. H3s are underneath of that. Think about if you were taking notes back in school and you are using main topics on the note page and then subtopics and then subtopics. Okay, so now let's talk about actually putting all of this into action, because we went over some of this. Maybe it's a little bit analogous without really seeing what you're looking at. So I want to show you how you can use something called the inspector. If you're using Chrome, you have this. You also have this in most other browsers. I don't know if they call it the exact same thing, but you can actually look at and see all of the CSS that is on a page, and you can actually monitor and modify this in real time and see how changing things affects the page and what it does. So just to give you a little bit of insight here, up here, we are looking at, again, this is a code on the left, and that code is generating this visual over here on the right. So what we're going to look at here is, this is global CSS. And if you see, we're targeting very general things. We're not targeting specific classes, which I'll show you an example of here in just a moment. We're kind of defining, like, generally speaking, how should images be laid out? How should paragraphs be laid out here? And you can see that these are in style tags. If you're not referencing a separate CSS style sheet, then you will put the styling inside of tags like this. Again, this is an email, so it's slightly different. I just want to show you a couple of examples. And then you can see here, this is a media query, and we are targeting right here. This is basically targeting a selector here. I'll explain classes and selectors in a second. And then now we're looking at inline styling. So up here, we applied a body, but we didn't apply styling to the body here, because if we had, it would make all of the body coloring the same thing. And in here, we just wanted one small section of this to be colored this color, right? This is an example of a div. So here you have the body, and this is everything on the page. And then underneath of that, you have a div, which is a container. And you can see here, this is just showing what's called pre-header text. It looks like this is basically just set to transparent. So technically this isn't even showing right now. So if we keep going down the page just to look for some actual elements, let's find this. I'll go ahead and Control F, find that. Okay. So this is the div, this is the container right here for this section of text. And in an email, this is a little bit different. You see these TDs and TRs. These are basically tables. That is how you it's another way that you can lay out content. But if you look at the specific thing right here, this is this text. That's what we're looking at. You've got an inline style for emails. You want to lean more towards doing inline styles. And so you can see here, there's a font family defined. You can see that the font weight is set to bold. You can see a line height has been set, and the alignment has been set to left aligned. And then there's an actual color that's been placed here. You can see this does not have a actual heading tag, right? They're controlling the style specifically with stylistic elements, and they're not setting this as an H1. Again, for an email, this is a slightly different situation than a website, but I just wanted to show you an example. You'll see CSS inline just like this, and then you'll also see CSS like this applied more globally. So let's take a look at an actual website. This is the most hideous website I could possibly find. But you can see over here, what I've done is I've right-clicked and selected Inspect. And what that's going to do is that's going to open all of the HTML on the page. And we can actually open this up and look at it and see what's going on inside of here. So if you hover over a specific element, you click Inspect, it will highlight that element here. So let's take a look at what we've got. We've got a H1. So we've got a heading of the page, which makes sense because this is the first thing on the page. And then directly inside of this, we've set this as a link, right? Because this is a link, and you can see it is a link as I hover over it. That inside of a link, you have an href here. This is basically just showing that it's going to go nowhere. The little backslash is basically just shortcutting to the root, and we're on the home page. So it's just going to keep looping into the home page if you click it. And then right here, you've got a span tag, which you don't need to worry about that right now. And then directly underneath of that, you've got judge a book by its cover. So the reason that the span is there because they wanted to stylize and add an underline to this. And then you see you've got the closing tag for the link, and then you've got the closing tag for the H1. Now let's look at this. Again, you can expand these. So here's an here's an H2 tag. And then you've got the actual content that is inside the H2, and then you've got the closing. While you're here, I want you to look and see these different colored sections. If you go all the way over to the right of this screen, you'll actually see where it shows margin, border, and padding, just like we discussed earlier. And then in addition to that, you can actually see the pixel dimensions of the content as well, the content being in blue. So if we wanted to potentially look at modifying this, what I'm going to do over here is if I wanted to, and this is a good way to find out where spacing is on a website if you need to change something, for example. Like I can see that there's 30 pixels worth of padding added between these things, and if I wanted them to be closer, but I couldn't figure out what was creating it, I can actually go hover over this element, select it. I see there's the padding. It's right here. It's applied directly to the H2 because that's what I'm highlighted on. You can see this one has margin on it with the orange, but we want to get rid of that padding. So let's look for padding. Okay. What this is showing right here is that H2s have 30 pixels of padding applied to them. If I check this off, every H2 on this page should lose that 30 pixels of padding if this is a global style. You can also see things like this inside of the style sheet. You've got H1s, H2s, and paragraph tags all have margin set to 0 and padding set to 0. Here's what I want you to understand, though, is that there's a hierarchy to this as well. So your global style sheet can set add a CSS pair in there. It can create styling. And then as you get closer and closer to the element, you can override that styling. So if I apply a style on this page specifically that overrides styling that's defined inside of the style sheet itself, then it will update and it will override it. And that's where you see this little crosses going on because we've got right here, somewhere in here, margin is set to auto and it's overriding this CSS from the style sheet. And again, we're going from bottom up as far as like most general CSS down to slowly most narrow or most localized CSS. So if I change this, obviously that got rid of it. But if we wanted to, you could add padding and then let's do 100 pixels. So now you can see visually it added it. And then in addition to that, it overrode the padding from this style sheet right here. So you can see, again, this is another example of me overriding the padding. That same thing would happen here if you decided you want to change this to 20. You can obviously modify the padding directly inside of this section. So what I'm trying to explain here is that you can go in here, you can modify and understand what's applying to different things. So if I wanted to see what styling is applied to this, I can go here and you can see this is a paragraph section. And then here's the actual content. And then you can see this EM. Basically what that is over here is styling applied for italicizing something. And you can see the EM has font style italics. And then you can see it also stylizes on this specific page or from another style sheet. The coloring is going to be defined here. And then you've got spacing and font size. Okay. Now that you have a general idea of how this looks and how the inspector works, let's take a look at classes. So if you want to stylize something and you want to create a global CSS, you can target things other than just HTML elements. And this is what happens more commonly is you can see here that this div is showing class equals book. And then there's no actual content here, right? So what we're doing is we're saying that this class is equal to book, and then there's a CSS styling that is applied to anything that has the class book. So if we were to go now change this and say background color and change that to black. So you see what I did? That container was targeted and I've gone ahead and added a background color to the container. So anywhere that there is something that says book, you can see this one's also been modified. So you can see this as the same container with the same class. Same here. This is also a container that has the class book. So now you're starting to see and understand how classes work and how you can focus and stylize things. Now, how do you actually add CSS in? Well, it kind of depends on the a specific approach that you're taking, the specific builder that you're using, as to how you're going to apply the CSS and where. But before we do that, I want to show you one other quick trick here. If you want to see the source code of a page, and I'm going to actually see if I can open this in a new window. Okay. So I'm going to go to this site so that it's not logged in and also keeping me in the builder because I don't want that. I'm going to type view-source and then add the 2 dots and click go. So what we're looking at here is the actual HTML on the page. So in the inspector, you've got things and it's sort of stylized and organized in a certain way, but it's not the raw code, at least not as cleanly as you're looking at here. So what you're looking at, this is the full code of the page. So if you ever want to take a look at exactly what's being rendered on the page, you can do so by typing that view-source and then adding, I can't remember if the colon or the semicolon, but this will show you exactly what we were just looking at, but without the CSS styling in the way. So you can see this is all just HTML. So you can see there's links, here's the actual content, here's this. So this is what the raw code looks like for your website, essentially. Okay, so let's look at the builder now. There's 2 places inside of here that you can create CSS. You can go in here to the settings tab in UTheme and you can create custom code, and you can literally just come in here, target a selector, and add whatever CSS you want. So if I go down here to the bottom, you can see here's a media query, and I am targeting a container. Basically what I'm doing is I'm adding 70 pixels of margin to the top of the page when this is small. And what is that doing? It's spacing everything down to allow these buttons to fill that space. Another media query, this one going the opposite direction. Before we were looking at max width, now we're looking at min width. So what's happening here is when this gets big enough, those buttons, what it's doing is, here, mobile buttons is a class that's been added to these things inside of the HTML. And when it gets over 1100 pixels, the buttons are set to display equals none. So what does that mean? It means they will no longer show, they'll disappear. So you can see them right here in transition of disappearing. And then at the same time, this is going to kick in and it's going to remove that 70 pixels that we add when we shrink down. So you can see that's what's controlling adding the space and allowing the buttons to show or not show. Let's look at, I guess this is probably helpful. Button right. This is a class that's been established for this specific button. And you can see here, I'm giving it a background color. I'm giving it a border of 1 pixel. That's not technically necessary. I'm setting the color of the text to be red, aligning items to the right because I want this button to show up on the right. Display is in line. The height is 70, which matches up with the original 70 that I showed you down below. Here's the line height, and this is basically just setting how the spacing is with the font, with the text. This is the font size, there's the font weight, and then this is the width to make it fill the remainder of the container. So this is global CSS. If I wanted to change, just to give you another example, if I wanted to change all of my buttons, and I'm going to drag this back over here. If I wanted to change all of my buttons so they had rounded corners, here's what I could do. Also, you can resize this and drag these around. So if I find this button, I can see right here, as I scroll up, it's going to highlight different sections. So you can see you want to go to the highest part that you can get inside of this button, because I want to target I want to make sure that I'm targeting the right thing. So if I look here, this is specific to the button. This is my button class right here. Inside of this link, essentially what it's building is it's creating a link, and then what that link is, the styling that is attached to the link is this UK button, and then also UK button. Let's stretch this back over a little bit so I can see more. UK button primary, right? So this is a primary button. And then if we look, we can go over here and I can see which of these classes is doing what things. So if you look at UK button, you can see it's defining the font weight, it's defining the text transformation, it's defining layout, box sizing, the amount of padding. So if I wanted to make the button wider, I could do that here. Overflow, margin, all that stuff. So, but what I want to do is I want to figure out where the radius is. So I'm going to do radius. And I see here border radius. So you saw I typed in the search bar, I found border radius, and I want to see what the border radius would look like at 12 pixels. And there, my button has been modified in real time. Now keep in mind, I didn't fix the CSS. All I'm doing is I'm modifying it on the page to see what it would look like. If I wanted to permanently, well, not permanently, but actually change this, all I would do now is I would say, okay, I know that the border radius is attached to UK button. So I would go to my global CSS, border radius, 12 pixels, and then I would close it. And now, boom, it's uploaded. So this is going to affect every single button on every single page that has the class UK button. Now, I want to also point something out. The content here doesn't know that something is necessarily a button. So if I was to go to this and I applied a class to this image, right now I'm in the image settings, and let's say I want to change this to UK button, and not change, but add. Depending on how your divs are nested, this was probably not the right way to approach this because of how it's nested. But let me attach. Yeah, here's a panel. Let's see if I put it in here, what changes. Yeah, so you can see the border radius. Because I just said that this is a class UK button, it's applied all the same styling that goes with UK button. It's just applied it to this, right? So if we look at UK button, it's applied margin of 0, it's applied border, none, it's applied font, inherit, text trans. It's added all of these different styles to this thing. And if you watch, it'll go back if I remove the class from that div. See? So I went back to how it was and put it back. And you can see it's applying the styles in real time. So this is how CSS works. This is how you can troubleshoot. You're going to have to learn by physically doing this. It's the only way to really get a good feel of what's going on and understanding how to do it. But now that you have this foundation and you have a little bit more of an understanding of how CSS works, how it is used, and how you can check and modify CSS, I mean, you can even go in here and you can rewrite content on this page. So if I inspect this and I write, "This is the best book I've ever read," it's literally going to update the content. So this is a super useful tool for understanding what's going on the page and for troubleshooting. So I'm sure you're going to have questions. We've talked a lot about a ton of different things here, and go ahead and reach out to me if you have questions, if you're stuck, and go ahead and test some of this out on a few of your websites. Get familiar with this. If you do need help with stylizing something, you can ask ChatGPT. You can say, hey, here's another tool that you may use. Let's say I want to figure out how to style something in here. You can right click on a section, a div, and you can say edit as HTML. And then you can copy this HTML, paste it into ChatGPT, and explain what you want to do. And it will tell you what CSS you need to add. So that's another thing that you can use kind of as a crutch as you're getting to learn all of this stuff. The only real way, like I said, to learn this is to practice. So get out there, mess some stuff up, break some things, play with some CSS, and I will catch you on the other lessons. Cheers.